Flash back to 2015 and the NYS scandal came up. There was a loss of 791 million shillings. In fact, the president himself addressed you directly on this.
Wewe wako wewe, ulinisimamisha hapo mbele ya bunge, nikafuta mawaziri na nani ambao sasa wananilaumu, they hate me, wengine wana campaign against me, na wewe ndio uliniambia hii watu wako mpaka wa leo, this is 2 years, hujaniambia where their guilt is.
Did you mislead the president?
No, I did not, and I will not. I have never. And if I did, and looking at my responsibility, I would have not continued to serve in my capacity where I am today. It would have been very clear to me that it's not a situation where I continue serving. But the thing is that we may not have understood each other at the moment on that material day when we were discussing issues. It was how our forum was handled, probably, that made us not understand how we were sharing information at that particular time. Otherwise, I want to tell you one thing. In that year, we had the 124 files that we were investigating actively, that we had discussed very prominently across the country. But out of that, we had generated over 350 cases or files, which many of which have ended up in court. And out of this, whether at the national or county levels, we have over 1,000 people before the courts of law across the country. So we cannot talk about facts which are not supported, or which we cannot go to court and support, as the evidence that we gather must stand before the court of law.
Now that we're speaking about evidence, and let's stay with the NYS 1 matter for a bit. What is the status of the current Kirinyaga Governor Anne Waiguru, who was then the devolution CS?
There were many individuals that we had investigated, and you can also recall that we took over 27 people to court, and the Kirinyaga governor was one of the people who have been investigated, and still we are analyzing some of the information that relate to that matter of the NYS 791, or the first NYS case. So we are still clarifying our points. We are still checking where we are told that something goes somewhere, but we cannot take any individual to court unless we have a tangible evidence against that particular individual. But we are still in the process of compiling that, because it's a very voluminous and laborious process.
Is she still a person of interest, according
anybody within that ministry at that particular time, including a few more who served later on, still remain persons of interest. And until we are through with the process, and until we say that we've also filed matters in court for recovery purposes, we cannot say that somebody is part of that problem or not, until we have the clear, tangible evidence against every individual.
She says a lawyer has written to you 6 times to have a clear public.
In an investigation process, we also have a back and forth. Go back to the field, check what is there, verify information that is brought to us today, compare with what we had before. Writing to us 6 times may be factual or may not be. I don't want to struggle with that. I do not want to struggle with that.
Have you seen any then?
I have seen some, maybe, but I have not seen the 6 times or the announcements that I hear through the media. So that I really do not want to struggle with it.
But even after seeing the one that you said you haven't cleared the public?
We will not go by an individual pressure in responding to any particular case. We will only be informed, and we can only be informed by investigations output and outcome, which we eventually progress to the next level. So if everybody is to write to us and put pressure, then we will not be able to achieve the work that is before us in its proper sense. So we have to follow the procedures. So a particular individual's pressure is outside that procedure.
All these policies that you keep mentioning, there are still more than 27 people who are acquitted of crimes of planning to defraud or commit economic crimes. They were acquitted from the court because of lack of evidence.
I don't believe
that a failure from
I do not believe it's a lack of evidence. That's why that matter is in the Court of Appeal. So let's wait and see how it progresses there.
So according to you, believe
as far as we are concerned, we had clear evidence, watertight, and that's why we progressed. And remember, when we investigate matters, we compile files at EACC level. The office of the DPP is also another independent institution which looks at all these files with independent eyes and establishes whether actually what we have set out as evidence is sufficient and good enough to progress to court, or sometimes not sufficient, and therefore we look at alternative ways of dealing with matters that have come to us. So it cannot just pass from us to DPP and all the way to courts and be declared of not sufficient enough to sustain prosecution. That's why the matter is before the Court of Appeal.
Do you read the malice in the judiciary system?
I don't want to say that. We are in court. Let's listen to the next stage.
Which is the weakest link institution, if you may, because you've mentioned the DPP, the EACC. Which is the weakest link in your own observation? Where are you failing?
You see, the chain in this particular instance has so many of us. It has the investigators or the investigating agencies, it has the prosecuting agency, it has the adjudicating agency. Sometimes you may not directly say the whole institution has a problem. Individuals can be problems within each of these institutions. There could be a magistrate which might be a problem. There can be a judge who at one instance might be a problem, but the entire or a prosecutor at one time, or an investigator. You cannot say judiciary as a whole is a failure, the prosecution as a whole is a problem, the investigating agency as a whole is useless. You cannot say that. Like any other process of conducting activities, there can occur some hitch here and there.
And speaking of hitches, just last week EACC published a gazette notice which acknowledges that a suspect in NYS1 may have lied in an affidavit. In fact, the word used, and I quote, are EACC and DCI noted that allegations made were bereft of truth. In hindsight, what was not done properly when it comes to NYS1?
In investigations process, you might, even towards the tail end of what you are doing, you discover something bigger that you may not have identified in the middle of the course of your work, and therefore you go back and do all this.
What did you miss in NYS1?
So I cannot identify directly what we missed, probably because of the nature of the problem then, and the complexity of the NYS problems. There may be one or two things that needed a bit more attention. So where we find that we require more attention, we always go back and give more attention as due and complete the process.
So is NYS1 still an open case?
Any investigation that we find that there's something that requires going back to clarify will always remain that.
Last week, EACC released a report, and page 40 of your own report, which I'm holding here, the National Ethics and Corruption Survey, shows that 54.5% of the respondents you interviewed believe EACC is not effective in the fight against corruption. That is more than half of Kenyans. Kotu has come out to say that EACC should be disbanded. The president himself left out EACC when he praised the DPP and other agencies for fighting graft. In your own view, do you think EACC should be disbanded? EACC
should not be disbanded. In fact, if you identify a problem, whether it is an individual or the entire people of Kenya should not talk about if an institution has a problem, rush to disbanding it. If an institution has a particular problem, identify and find ways of dealing with the problem. The fact that Kenyans say that they may not understand fully what it is does not also represent that Kenyans are dismissing EACC.
This is your own report, 54.5%. That is more than half of Kenyans.
Because these are the same Kenyans, if you ask more, they tell you that, yes, we wanted people to be prosecuted and jailed. But they do not understand the fact that EACC's responsibility is to investigate matters and also educate them, the public itself, in fighting corruption. But what they expect is us to investigate, arrest, take people to court and jail. What we have been telling them very clearly is that, yes, our responsibility is to make sure that these people arrive in court, push every evidence and sustain the case in court, and work hard to secure conviction.
Let's turn the focus to EACC itself and yourself as the CEO. Actually, on the 29th of June this same year, a former EACC investigator who's called Adan Moro Guracha filed an affidavit in the Labor Relations Court accusing you of single-handedly scuttling the probe into NYS1 by receiving more than 300 million shillings.
This is a matter in court, and therefore I don't want to discuss this matter because we've filed our responses in court. However, an investigation process requires so many people, and an investigation in EACC has various teams to undertake. I cannot at one time direct to stop any investigations without following the due process of any investigation within the law. But even if one is to be indulged in a bad process, do you think somebody whose volume of thread was the 700 will give out 300 and remain with what? That person.
But you said there can be more money than the 700.
They cannot be. It's even unrealistic. But let me not talk about this because we are defending, and I'm clearly defending myself in court.
Let's talk about the former governor, Evans Kidero. He's suing EACC for harassment. Is it practical for EACC to arrest him and then go back and look for papers? Isn't it supposed to be the other way around? Have evidence and then come and arrest someone?
It's practical that investigate an individual or an entity, collect information, compile a report, take the file to go through the DPP. But it is also possible that the same individual has other cases for which we are looking for another piece of information different from the one that we've already taken to court. So there's nothing strange here, there's nothing new as far as that particular issue is concerned. The fact that we investigate an individual on one matter and arrive in court does also not close him from various other investigations.
Okay. And so let's talk about asset recovery now. In June, EACC said that you are looking to recover assets worth 8.6 billion shillings. How far have you gone with that recovery?
An assets recovery process is a continuous process.
But how
First
far
of
have you
all,
gone?
investigations usually take quite a very long period of time. We have assets as it stands today. For the last 5 years that I've been there, we've recovered assets worth over 3.7 billion shillings, and we have more than assets that we have filed in courts. That was that month, but by this month, by today, I have assets 388 cases filed in court for the purposes of recovering assets, and this is assets estimated to be worth over 10.3 billion shillings.
And speaking of asset recovery, the Ruaraka land case still remains unresolved. In fact, the allegations that it's taking so long because it involves the high and mighty in the society. Where's the delay from?
I don't want to say that there is a delay. I just want to say that, like any other investigation, it's taking its time to mature, and we are on the usual back and forth of investigation and verification
Have you
processes.
gotten any resistance from the high and mighty?
We do not have any resistance, and we are only working to clarify some of the points that we think needs further clarification as we head to court.
The EACC officials were involved in certain issues around corruption. Are you investigating anyone in the EACC?
Wherever, you know, on a number of occasions we hear that an EACC officer is mentioned. Sometimes a prosecutor is mentioned, sometimes a judiciary official is mentioned. But in our case, when it is an officer who is an EACC officer, we always have our ways of dealing with that. We have an internal control and investigation mechanism. We have individuals whose task is just to observe activities of various individuals within the commission, and we have a record that even for the last 6 years I've been there, we've investigated a few individuals and vetted them out of the commission.
So you've received complaints against some of your officers in your work?
Every day you see, like many other institutions, you hear, even through the media, somebody writing this, saying that, and we take it seriously.
And so far, graft seems to have devolved to the counties now, where some governors become overnight billionaires. What is the EACC's plan to tame graft in all the 47?
We have over 500 staff from counties, actually, before various courts of law, and that number is growing, like the ones at the national level. So we have that, and we also have a plan to increase the numbers of our regional offices and staffing establishment within those regional offices. Before the end of this year, we are adding 3 more, and we are increasing more numbers of investigators and lawyers that deal with, and the education officers who deal with our matters at that level.
Do you think Bible study could help in the fight against graft?
One of the problems that we can clearly see bedeviling our country is the erosion of our national values and even individual values. And where does a value or inculcating of value emanate from? Isn't it from family level, from religion and religious support, from society and the cultural perspectives that helps shape up an individual as the individual grows? So if Bible is an instrument that is used to inculcate the same, can't it be one of the tools that can be deployed to provide the matters of support in enhancing values, especially inculcating individual values?
It's a waste of time and money, because you can't even, how do you measure the success of the Bible study program that EACC has launched?
We are in partnership with the Interreligious Council of Kenya, where every religion is represented.
But how do you measure the success?
The success in such like situation may not be an examination where you go and sit people down and test them and carry your marks off head or off that side that particular time. It is where you will see people's change in behavior, change in their conduct. So it may not be your only way of, or our only way of dealing with it, but we see that there is merit in working with religious organizations also to fight issues of value erosion for the people of Kenya.
But even in your own recommendation on the report that just came out from the National Ethics and Corruption Survey released on Monday, the recommendation says, and I quote, strengthen the laws to ensure cases are handled promptly and harsher sentences meted out on the culprits. It doesn't say anything about relief.
Let me tell you one thing. The recommendation that we heighten our process of strengthening laws and how we conduct law enforcement is definitely looking at a foremost role of our institution, where we are tasked with law enforcement to fight corruption. That is, investigate and take matters to court or prosecute. But at the same time, we also have responsibility of public education as a core or integral part of the mandate of the commission.
And as we come to an end, in your 6 years of experience at the EACC, what is the one thing you'd change to strengthen the institution even more?
I really want us to have enhanced legal framework, enhanced resource input, and enhanced support from the public and public participation, which is quite crucial.
Right, and finally, in 6 years, what do you say is your greatest achievement?
When I took over, I had 260 or so staff. Today I'm living at about 800 or so. Then I have also had very old facilities and equipments, especially for investigators. When I took over today, we have most modern equipments, including a forensic lab which is conducting quite a number of our activities. I have enhanced the skill of my staff as I progress. I am, as I live, we are launching an integrity academy, in fact in the next 2 weeks. But above all, the year I took over, we had very few cases concluded in court. And this year, we so far have had 49 cases concluded in court with 39 convictions.
Should we expect bigger convictions before you leave?
I believe so. In the next few months that I'm there, we'll get more. That's my prayers, because we have very many cases before the courts across the country.
EACC CEO Halakhe Waqo, thank you so much for making time.
Asante sana.
Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.